Sometimes survival comes at the darkest price. When a desperate mother with nowhere left to turn accepts a proposal from a man who seems too good to be true, she discovers that monsters don't always hide in shadows. Sometimes they hide behind million-dollar smiles and wedding rings. This is the story of Sarah Mitchell, a woman who traded one nightmare for another, all for the sake of her children. The eviction notice trembled in Sarah Mitchell's hands as she sat on the worn steps of her apartment building in Detroit, Michigan. The paper was crisp, official, and brutally clear. She had 7 days to vacate the premises or face forcible removal. 7 days to find a miracle. "Mommy, I'm hungry." Sarah looked down at her daughter Emma's upturned face. Those big hazel eyes that mirrored her own. The blonde curls that hadn't seen a proper haircut in months. At 6 years old, Emma was too young to understand why dinner lately had been nothing but dollar store pasta and the occasional can of beans. Too young to know that her mother cried herself to sleep every night, wondering how she'd gotten here. "I know, sweetie. We'll eat soon, I promise." Sarah forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her son Tyler, 8 years old and far too perceptive for his age, sat silently beside her, his jaw set in that stubborn way that reminded Sarah so much of his father. The father who'd walked out 2 years ago when the cancer diagnosis came, when the medical bills started piling up, when being a husband and father became too inconvenient for Michael Mitchell's new life with his secretary in California. Sarah had fought the cancer and won, but the victory had cost her everything else. Her job at the accounting firm, gone while she underwent chemotherapy. Her savings, drained by treatments that her inadequate insurance barely covered. Her dignity, slowly eroding with each rejected job application, each "we've decided to go with another candidate" email. At 32 years old, Sarah Mitchell was a survivor in the worst possible way. She'd survived cancer, but she was dying anyway, just more slowly, more publicly, with 2 children watching her drown. "Mrs. Mitchell?" Sarah looked up to see Mrs. Chen, her elderly neighbor, approaching with a concerned expression. The older woman had been kind to them, often leaving casseroles by their door, pretending she'd accidentally made too much. "Mrs. Chen, hello." Sarah quickly wiped her eyes, shoving the eviction notice into her purse. "Sarah, dear, I heard about the eviction. I'm so sorry." Mrs. Chen sat down beside her, her weathered hand patting Sarah's knee. "Have you thought about? Well, have you considered all your options?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "I've applied to 73 jobs in the past month. 73. I'm overqualified for retail, underqualified for management positions because of my 2-year gap. And nobody wants to hire someone with a recent cancer history, even though they can't legally say that's why." "What about family?" "My parents died in a car accident when I was 20. I'm an only child." "Michael's family." Sarah shook her head. "They made it clear whose side they're on. I'm alone in this." Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. "There's a man I know, Victor Thornwood. Very wealthy businessman, owns half the real estate in Oakland County. He's looking for a wife." Sarah stared at her neighbor. "Excuse me? I know how it sounds, but hear me out. He's 45, never been married, no children. He's respected in the community, goes to charity galas, sits on hospital boards. He told me explicitly he wants a refined woman, someone who can be a proper wife, someone with children who can make his mansion feel like a home." Mrs. Chen's eyes were earnest. "He's offering security, Sarah. Real security. I don't even know this man. Why would he want to marry a broke, desperate single mother?" Sarah's voice was sharp with suspicion and barely concealed desperation. "He values family, respectability, the appearance of normalcy." Mrs. Chen pulled a business card from her purse. "He's having a dinner party this Friday night. I can get you an invitation. Just meet him, talk to him. What do you have to lose?" Sarah looked at the business card. Heavy cream cardstock with elegant embossed lettering. Victor Thornwood, CEO, Thornwood Properties and Investments. Then she looked at her children. Emma was trying to interest Tyler in a game with rocks and sticks. Their childhood reduced to found objects and imagination because Sarah couldn't afford toys anymore. "What do I have to lose?" Sarah whispered. "Everything. And I've almost lost that already." She took the card. The golden cage. The Thornwood estate in Bloomfield Hills was something out of a movie. As the taxi, paid for with the last $40 in Sarah's account, pulled through ornate iron gates and up a winding driveway lined with mature oak trees, Sarah felt her stomach twist with anxiety. The mansion was a sprawling Georgian colonial, all white columns and gleaming windows, set on what had to be at least 10 acres of perfectly manicured grounds. She was so far out of her league that it was almost laughable. Sarah had borrowed a dress from Mrs. Chen, a simple black cocktail dress that was slightly too big but passed for elegant with the right belt. She'd spent an hour on her makeup, trying to hide the exhaustion, the stress, the desperation. Emma and Tyler were with Mrs. Chen for the evening, bribed with the promise of pizza and a movie. A valet opened her taxi door. An actual valet. "Good evening, ma'am. Welcome to Thornwood Estate." The foyer alone was larger than her entire apartment. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, a double staircase that curved upward like something from a fairy tale. Servers in black and white circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres among clusters of impeccably dressed guests. Doctors, lawyers, business people, all of them moving through this world of wealth with the easy comfort of those who'd never known want. Sarah accepted a champagne flute she had no intention of drinking and tried not to look as terrified as she felt. "You must be Sarah." The voice was smooth, cultured, with just a hint of warmth. Sarah turned to find herself face to face with Victor Thornwood. He was handsome in the way of men who could afford personal trainers, tailored suits, and excellent dentistry. Tall, maybe 6'2", with salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, striking blue eyes, and a smile that was both charming and calculating. He wore his wealth comfortably. A Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than 3 months of Sarah's former rent. A Patek Philippe watch glinting at his wrist. "Mr. Thornwood, thank you for inviting me." Sarah extended her hand, grateful that it wasn't shaking. He took it, his grip firm but not aggressive, his skin soft in a way that spoke of a life free from manual labor. "Please call me Victor. Mrs. Chen spoke very highly of you. She said you were a woman of quality who'd fallen on difficult times." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "That's one way to put it." "Walk with me." Victor offered his arm, and Sarah took it, aware of curious eyes following them as he led her through the party, out through French doors onto a terrace overlooking illuminated gardens. The night air was cool, late September in Michigan, and Sarah shivered slightly. Victor immediately shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders, a gesture so smooth it had to be practiced. "Mrs. Chen tells me you have 2 children, a daughter and a son, Emma and Tyler, 6 and 8. Sarah's voice softened the way it always did when she talked about her kids. "They're the best thing in my life. Tell me about them." And Sarah did. She told him about Emma's love of drawing, how she could spend hours with crayons and paper, creating entire worlds. About Tyler's protective nature, how he'd started walking Emma to school every day, holding her hand like a little man even though he was barely tall enough to reach the crossing guard button. About their resilience, their humor, their capacity for joy even when life had given them every reason to be bitter. Victor listened intently, asking questions, nodding at the right moments. He was good at this, making her feel heard, seen, valued. "And their father?" he asked carefully. "Gone. He left when I was diagnosed with breast cancer 2 years ago. The divorce was finalized 18 months ago. He sends a check for $200 every month when he remembers and hasn't seen the kids since he moved to San Francisco." Sarah heard the bitterness in her own voice and tried to soften it. "But we're better off without him." "Cancer," Victor repeated. "That must have been terrifying." "It was. But I survived. I'm healthy now, completely clear for 14 months. Sarah felt the need to establish this, to make it clear she wasn't damaged goods, wasn't a liability. "And yet you're here." Victor's blue eyes studied her face. "Mrs. Chen said you're facing eviction." Sarah wanted to lie, to pretend things weren't as desperate as they were. But what was the point? "Yes. I lost my job during treatment. My insurance covered about 60% of my medical costs. I've been burning through savings, borrowing from payday lenders, selling everything that isn't nailed down. I've applied for hundreds of jobs, but—" She shrugged helplessly. "Nobody wants to take a chance on someone with a gap in their employment, especially in accounting where everything is about reliability and consistency. You're an accountant." "I was. Bachelor's degree from University of Michigan, 8 years with Henderson and Associates before." She gestured vaguely. Life happened. Victor was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting over the gardens. When he spoke again, his voice was businesslike, almost clinical. "I'm going to be direct with you, Sarah, because I think you're the kind of woman who appreciates honesty. I'm 45 years old. I've built an empire from nothing. My father was a construction worker who drank himself to death. My mother cleaned houses. I put myself through night school, worked 80-hour weeks, made smart investments, and now I own properties worth over $300 million. Sarah's breath caught. $300 million. She couldn't even conceptualize that kind of wealth. "But money doesn't buy everything," Victor continued. "It doesn't buy respectability in certain circles. It doesn't buy a family. It doesn't buy the kind of image I need to move in the philanthropic and social circles that are important for my business. He turned to face her fully. I need a wife, Sarah. Someone intelligent, educated, attractive. Someone who can host dinner parties, sit on charity boards, make my home look like more than just a monument to loneliness. Someone with children who can make this place feel alive. And in return, Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Security. Complete financial security for you and your children. A home you'll never lose. The best schools. Healthcare without fear of bankruptcy. A chance to breathe. His eyes locked with hers. I'm not offering a love story, Sarah. I'm offering a transaction. You provide me with the family and respectability I need. I provide you with the stability you desperately want for your children. It was the most clinical proposal Sarah had ever heard. No romance. No pretense of affection. Just a business deal dressed up in wedding vows. Why me? She asked. You could have anyone. Because desperation makes people honest. Because you're educated enough to fit into my world, but humble enough not to have expectations of love and passion. Because your children are young enough to adapt but old enough to be past the baby stage. Because Mrs. Chen vouched for your character, and I trust her judgment. He paused. And because I can see in your eyes that you're considering it, which means you're practical enough to make this arrangement work. Sarah should have been offended. She should have thrown his jacket back at him and called for her taxi. But instead, she thought about Emma's hungry eyes, Tyler's too adult expression. The eviction notice crumpled in her purse. What exactly would you expect from me? To be my wife in public, attend events with me, host dinners, represent the Thornwood name with grace, to manage the household staff, to raise your children here, to be available when I need a partner for social functions. He paused, his expression unreadable. Privately, you would have your own suite of rooms. I wouldn't force myself on you. If physical intimacy ever develops, it would be consensual. But I won't lie and say I'm looking for a celibate arrangement forever. How long would we have to stay married? A minimum of 5 years. After that, if you want to leave, you'll receive a settlement of $2 million and a house of your choosing. If you stay longer, the settlement increases. The children will have trust funds regardless, college, graduate school, whatever they need, all paid for. $2 million. Sarah's mind reeled. She could set up her kids for life, give them opportunities she'd never dreamed of, get them out of the cycle of poverty that was threatening to swallow them whole. I need to think about it, she said. Of course. Take 3 days. Mrs. Chen knows how to reach me. Victor retrieved his jacket from her shoulders. But Sarah, I've learned to read people very well in my business, and I can see you've already made your decision. You're just trying to find a way to live with it. As Sarah rode home in the taxi, Victor had paid for it, of course, pressing $200 bills into her hand for the children. She stared out at the darkened streets of Detroit and wondered what kind of monster she was becoming. Then she thought about her babies sleeping in Mrs. Chen's apartment, bellies full of pizza for the first time in weeks, and she knew exactly what kind of monster she was. The kind who would do anything to save her children, even marry another monster to do it. The wedding. 3 months later, Sarah Mitchell became Sarah Thornwood in a small ceremony at Oakland County Courthouse. No white dress, no flowers, no pretense of romance. Just a judge, 2 witnesses, MRS, Chen and Victor's attorney, and 15 minutes of legal formalities that bound her life to a man she barely knew. Victor had been generous with the prenuptial agreement. His lawyer explained. If the marriage ended before 5 years, Sarah would receive $100,000 for each year completed. Plus the house they currently lived in would be signed over to her name, free and clear. If she stayed the full 5 years, the $2 million settlement was guaranteed. The children's trust funds, $1 million each, were established immediately and irrevocable. Sarah signed without hesitation. She was selling herself, yes, but at least she was getting a good price. The children had taken the news of the marriage with the resilience of young survivors. Tyler had been suspicious. Why would a rich man want to marry you, Mom? What does he want? But had softened when Sarah showed him pictures of his new room, complete with a computer and every video game system he could want. Emma had simply been excited about the princess house and the promise of a swing set in the yard. Neither of them asked if she loved Victor. They were too young to understand that love had nothing to do with it. The Thornwood estate became their home on a gray October morning. Victor had given them a full tour, 12 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen that Sarah would never have to cook in because they had a personal chef, Maria, who prepared 3 meals a day. There was a library with floor-to-ceiling books, a home theater, an indoor pool, and grounds that seemed to stretch forever. Emma and Tyler ran through the house like children discovering Wonderland, their shouts of excitement echoing off marble and crystal. Sarah watched them with tears in her eyes, tears of relief, of gratitude, of bone-deep exhaustion finally being released. They seem happy, Victor observed, standing beside her in the grand foyer. They've never had anything like this. Neither have I. Sarah turned to him. Thank you. Whatever this arrangement is, whatever happens, thank you for giving them this. Something flickered in Victor's eyes, surprise maybe, or pleasure at her gratitude. You're welcome. I keep my promises, Sarah, as long as you keep yours. Her suite of rooms was in the east wing, connected to the children's rooms by a shared sitting area. It was larger than her old apartment had been, a bedroom with a king-sized four-poster bed, a sitting room with a fireplace and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens, a bathroom with a soaking tub and shower that could fit 4 people, and a walk-in closet that was already filled with clothes in her size. I took the liberty of hiring a stylist, Victor explained when Sarah gaped at the racks of designer dresses, suits, casual wear. You'll need appropriate attire for the events we'll be attending. If anything doesn't fit or isn't to your taste, Simone can make adjustments. Sarah ran her hand along a Carolina Herrera dress, the fabric so fine it felt like liquid under her fingers. This must have cost. Don't think about the cost. That's my job now. Victor's voice was matter of fact. Your job is to look the part of Mrs. Victor Thornwood. Which reminds me, we have our first event this Saturday, the Children's Hospital Charity Gala. I'm on the board, so we'll be expected to make a significant showing. The first few weeks established a pattern. Victor worked long hours at his office downtown, often leaving before Sarah woke and returning after the children were in bed. When they did interact, he was unfailingly polite, almost formal, treating her with the courtesy one would show a respected business associate. They had dinner together when his schedule allowed, usually 3 or 4 nights a week, served by the household staff in the formal dining room. Victor would ask about her day, about the children, and listen with what seemed like genuine interest. He never raised his voice, never lost his temper, never made unreasonable demands. It should have been perfect. And that's what terrified Sarah most, because she learned the hard way that men who seemed too good to be true usually were. Michael had been charming too in the beginning. Attentive, generous, supportive, right up until the moment she became inconvenient. Sarah waited for the other shoe to drop, for Victor's true nature to reveal itself. She watched him carefully, looking for signs of violence, of cruelty, of the monster she'd married to escape her circumstances. But Victor remained frustratingly perfect. He was patient with the children, even joining them for dinner on weekends and asking Tyler about school, Emma about her drawings. He gave Sarah a generous household allowance and never questioned how she spent it. He introduced her to his circle with pride, calling her my brilliant wife, Sarah, and listing her credentials as an accountant with respect. At the charity galas and dinner parties, Sarah played her part perfectly. She wore the designer dresses, made small talk with doctors' wives and real estate moguls, laughed at appropriate moments, and stood beside Victor looking every inch the refined, elegant Mrs. Thornwood. And she waited, because monsters didn't stay hidden forever. Eventually, they always showed their teeth. Cracks in the facade. The first crack appeared 3 months into the marriage. Sarah had been working in the library. Victor had suggested she might want to take on managing some of the household finances, putting her accounting skills to use. When she heard raised voices from his study across the hall, I don't care what it costs, Richard. I want that property. And I want whoever's living there gone. Do you understand? Victor's voice was cold, hard, completely different from the polite tone he always used with her. Sarah froze, her pen hovering over the ledger. I don't care if she's 90 years old. I don't care if she's been there for 40 years. The building is condemned, which means she has no legal right to be there. Offer her $10,000 to relocate and give her 2 weeks. If she's not gone by then, start eviction proceedings. A pause. No, Richard. No exceptions. This is business. Sentiment doesn't pay the bills. Sarah heard the phone slam down, then silence. She sat very still, her heart pounding. That night at dinner, Victor was his usual charming self, asking Emma about her art class at the private school she now attended, complimenting Maria on the coq au vin. Sarah watched him carefully, looking for signs of the man she'd heard on the phone. Is something wrong? Victor asked, catching her staring. No, just thinking. About. Sarah chose her words carefully. About how you built your business. It must have required a lot of difficult decisions. Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. It did. Still does. Success in real estate isn't for the soft-hearted, Sarah. Sometimes you have to prioritize the bottom line over individual hardship. He cut into his chicken with surgical precision. It's no different than what you did marrying me. You made a difficult decision based on survival and practicality. I respect that about you. It was the first time he'd been so blunt about their arrangement in front of the children. Emma didn't notice, too focused on her food. But Tyler's head came up sharply, his eyes moving between his mother and Victor with sudden understanding. After dinner, Tyler cornered Sarah in her sitting room. You married him for money. It wasn't a question. Sarah sank onto the sofa, suddenly exhausted. I married him so we'd have a home. So you and Emma would be safe, fed, educated. So I wouldn't have to choose between electricity and groceries. But you don't love him. No. And he doesn't love me. It's an arrangement that benefits both of us. Sarah reached for her son's hand. Tyler, I know this isn't the fairy tale I told you when you were little. I know it's complicated. But sometimes adults have to make hard choices. Like when Dad left. The bitterness in Tyler's voice broke her heart. Your father made his choice. This is mine. And I'd make it again, every single time, because it gave you and your sister a chance at a better life. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. Does he hurt you? No. Victor's been nothing but kind to all of us. Then why do you look scared all the time? Sarah had no answer for that. Because Tyler was right. She was scared. Scared of the waiting, the uncertainty, the inevitable moment when the monster would show his face. The second crack came a month later. Sarah had been shopping with Emma in Birmingham, one of the upscale suburbs near their home. Emma had wanted a new art set, and Sarah had indulged her, still getting used to the luxury of being able to say yes without checking her bank balance first. They were loading bags into the Mercedes SUV Victor had bought her, another cage, golden but still a cage, when Sarah saw her. A woman, maybe late 30s, standing on the corner with a cardboard sign. Homeless. Anything helps. God bless. Sarah felt like she was looking at a ghost of her own near future. The woman she would have become if not for Victor's proposal. She pulled a $100 bill from her wallet and crossed the street. Here, she said softly, pressing the money into the woman's hand. The woman's eyes widened. Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you so much. What's your name? Jennifer. Jenny. Do you have family, Jenny? Anyone who can help? I did. My husband. He got sick. Nonsense. We lost everything paying for treatments. He died 6 months ago, and I couldn't keep up with the rent alone. I've been staying at the shelter, but Jenny's voice broke. It's so hard. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. I understand. More than you know. She gave Jenny her number, promised to help her find resources, and returned to the car where Emma waited. But as she drove home, she couldn't shake the image of Jenny's face, her own face, in a different timeline. That evening, she mentioned Jenny to Victor over dinner. I'd like to help her. Maybe we could. No. Victor's voice was flat, absolute. Sarah blinked. I'm sorry. I said no, Sarah. You can't help every desperate person you encounter. If you start, word spreads, and suddenly our gates will be crowded with people asking for handouts. He sipped his wine calmly. I give generously to established charities. That's more than sufficient. But this is different. She's one person who made poor choices just as you nearly did. Victor's eyes were hard. The difference is you had the sense to accept my help when it was offered. She'll find her own way, or she won't. Either way, it's not your concern. Sarah felt anger flash through her. She's a human being who's suffering. And there are millions like her. You can't save them all, Sarah. Don't be naive. Victor stood, clearly considering the discussion closed. You have a role to play in this household, and it doesn't include befriending vagrants. I expect you to exercise better judgment in the future. After he left, Sarah sat alone at the long table, her appetite gone. She'd seen it now, the coldness, the calculation, the complete lack of empathy for anyone who couldn't benefit him. The monster was showing his face, and she was bound to him for at least 5 years. The price of gold. Winter came to Michigan with a vengeance, blanketing the Thornwood estate in snow and ice. The mansion was warm, almost oppressively so, but Sarah felt cold all the time now. She'd started documenting everything in a journal, every cold comment, every dismissive gesture, every moment when Victor revealed the man beneath the charm. Not because she planned to leave. Where would she go? She'd signed a contract, taken his money, enrolled her children in schools that cost more per year than most people's salaries. But because she needed to remind herself that she wasn't crazy, wasn't imagining the psychological cage he'd built around her. Victor was meticulous in his control. He never raised his voice, never left bruises, never did anything that could be photographed or recorded as abuse. Instead, he used money like a weapon, reminding her constantly of her dependence. The children's school tuition is due, he'd say casually. $60,000. Good thing you have me to handle such things. Or, I saw you needed new tires for the Mercedes. I took care of it. $1,500. You're welcome. Every mention of money was a reminder. You owe me. You belong to me. You have nothing without me. The children were thriving in ways Sarah had only dreamed of. Emma's art teacher called her gifted, said she should attend summer programs at the Detroit Institute of Arts. Tyler had made the basketball team, his confidence growing as he excelled in a school that actually had resources, teachers who cared, programs that nurtured talent instead of just warehousing children. They were happy, and Sarah had bought that happiness with her own freedom. The breaking point came on a February evening during a dinner party. Victor was entertaining business associates, developers, investors, politicians. Sarah played her role perfectly, wearing a stunning Valentino gown, making intelligent conversation about real estate markets and urban development, being the perfect trophy wife. She was in the kitchen getting more wine when she overheard Victor talking to one of his partners. Your wife is lovely, Victor. And so young. What is she, 25? 32. But she takes care of herself. Victor's voice carried that proprietary pride that made Sarah's skin crawl. I rescued her from some unfortunate circumstances. Divorce, cancer, poverty. Quite a sob story. But she's proven to be an excellent investment. Cleans up well. Smart enough to hold a conversation. And the children provide the family image I needed. Investment. The other man laughed. I like that. My second wife was an investment too. Sometimes you have to buy quality. Sarah stood frozen in the doorway, the wine bottle cold against her palm. Investment. That's all she was. A commodity he'd purchased to improve his social standing. She made it through the rest of the evening on autopilot, smiling and laughing and playing her part. But when the last guest left and Victor went to his study to make phone calls, Sarah walked through the silent mansion to her suite and finally let herself break. She cried for the girl she'd been at 22, full of hope and ambition, who'd believed hard work and love would be enough. She cried for the woman she'd become at 30, broken by illness and abandonment but still fighting. And she cried for the woman she was now, comfortable, secure, empty. Mom? Sarah looked up to find Tyler in her doorway, his face worried. I'm okay, baby. Just tired. You cry a lot now. Tyler came and sat beside her on the bed. More than when we lived in the apartment. More than when you were sick. Sometimes crying isn't about being sad. Sometimes it's just releasing pressure. I heard what he said. About you being an investment. Tyler's jaw was set in that stubborn way. I hate him. Tyler. I do. I hate that we live here. I hate his money. I hate that you have to pretend to love him when everyone can see you don't. Tyler's eyes were wet now too. I'd rather live in a small apartment and eat pasta every night if it meant you were happy. Sarah pulled her son into her arms, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, expensive now, bought with Victor's money. You're 8 years old. You shouldn't have to worry about your mother's happiness. I'm almost 9, and I'm not stupid. I know why you married him. I know you did it for me and Emma. Tyler pulled back, looking at her with eyes that were far too old. But I need you to know, I don't want this if it makes you this sad. We'd figure something else out. There was no something else, Tyler. This was it. This or homelessness. Sarah wiped her eyes. I made a choice, and I have to live with it. For how long? 5 years. Then I get enough money that we can leave, start over somewhere new. That's 4 more years. Tyler's voice was hollow. 4 more years of watching you disappear a little more every day. The truth of it hit Sarah like a physical blow. Because Tyler was right. She was disappearing. The woman she'd been, the woman who'd fought cancer and poverty and despair with stubborn determination, was being slowly erased by comfort and security and a man who saw her as nothing more than a line item on his balance sheet. Rebellion. Spring came late to Michigan that year, but when it finally arrived, something shifted in Sarah. Maybe it was Tyler's words echoing in her head. Maybe it was seeing Jenny again, clean, sober, working at a coffee shop after Sarah had secretly, against Victor's orders, connected her with a women's shelter that provided job training. Maybe it was simply reaching the limit of what a person could endure while maintaining their sense of self. Whatever the catalyst, Sarah decided she was done disappearing. She started small. Victor wanted her at a business dinner on Thursday night. She claimed illness and stayed home with the children, making pancakes for dinner and watching movies in her pajamas. Victor was displeased but couldn't object without seeming unreasonable. She began volunteering at Emma's school library, something Victor considered appropriate. but that gave Sarah hours away from the estate, interacting with other mothers, with children who reminded her that life existed beyond gilded cages. She started saying no. "I need you to attend the hospital fundraiser this Saturday," Victor announced one evening. "I'm taking the children to the Detroit Zoo that day." Victor's fork paused midway to his mouth. "Excuse me, the zoo. Tyler's doing a project on ecosystems for science class, and Emma wants to see the penguins. I promised them." Sarah kept her voice level, reasonable. "You can attend the fundraiser alone. You did it for years before me. That's not the point. People expect to see us together. You're my wife, and they're my children. I'm choosing them this time." Sarah met his eyes without flinching. "You're welcome to join us at the zoo if you'd like." She knew he wouldn't. Victor hated anything that disrupted his carefully controlled image. And there was nothing controlled about two children running around a zoo, sticky with cotton candy and excitement. He attended the fundraiser alone, and Sarah spent Saturday watching Tyler carefully document each animal exhibit and Emma squeal with delight at the penguin feeding. For the first time in months, she felt like herself again. Victor's retaliation was subtle, but effective. The household allowance was cut in half the following week. No explanation, just a text from his accountant with a new amount. Sarah took a deep breath and called Victor's office. "The household allowance was reduced," she said when he answered. "Yes. Since you're not fulfilling all your obligations as my wife, I thought it appropriate to adjust your compensation accordingly." There it was, the ugliness beneath the polish. She was an employee being docked pay for poor performance. "I see. In that case, I'll need to take a job to make up the difference." Silence on the other end. Then, "That's out of the question." "Why?" "You just implied I'm not earning my keep. I'm an accountant, Victor. A good one. I could easily find work. My wife doesn't work. It reflects poorly on me. Suggests I can't provide adequately. Then restore the allowance." Another long pause. When Victor spoke again, his voice was ice. "We'll discuss this when I get home." Sarah hung up before he could say more, her heart pounding with fear and exhilaration. She just challenged him directly, violated the unspoken rules of their arrangement. She had no idea what he'd do in response. Victor came home that evening earlier than usual, his expression unreadable. He found Sarah in the library, reviewing the household accounts. "We need to talk." Sarah closed the ledger, folding her hands in her lap with a calmness she didn't feel. "I agree." Victor sat across from her, his posture rigid. "I think you're forgetting the terms of our arrangement. I think you're forgetting that I'm a human being, not a possession." His eyes flashed with anger, the first real emotion she'd seen him show beyond calculated charm. "I gave you everything. This house, security, a future for your children. And you repay me with insolence and disobedience. You bought compliance, Victor, not ownership." Sarah's voice shook slightly but held firm. "I've attended your parties, hosted your dinners, played the perfect wife in public. But I won't be treated like a pet who should be grateful for scraps from your table." "Scraps." Victor's laugh was bitter. "This mansion is scraps. The private schools, the cars, the clothes. Do you have any idea what women would do for what I've given you? Then call one of them. I'm sure you can find a replacement easily enough." Sarah stood, surprising herself with her own boldness. "Or you can remember that I'm your wife, not your employee. That I deserve respect, autonomy, and the basic human dignity of being consulted about decisions that affect my life and my children's lives." Victor stared at her, and for a moment, Sarah saw something dangerous in his expression, something dark and volatile that made her understand exactly what kind of monster she'd married. Then, like a switch being flipped, it was gone. His face smoothed into that familiar mask of civility. "You're right," he said quietly. "I apologize. The allowance will be restored, and I'll try to be more respectful of your time with the children." It should have been a victory, but Sarah knew better. She'd seen behind the mask, and what she'd seen terrified her, because the monster wasn't just cold and calculating. The monster had a temper, and she'd just poked it. The truth emerges. Sarah started researching Victor Thornwood in earnest after that night. She used the computers at the public library during her volunteer hours, not wanting her searches traced back to the estate's internet connection. What she found painted a disturbing picture. Victor's business success wasn't built on shrewd investments alone. It was built on a pattern of predatory practices that walked the fine line of legality. He bought distressed properties, evicted long-term tenants using technicalities, then flipped them for massive profits. He'd been sued 14 times in the past decade, by former business partners, by tenants, by employees. Every lawsuit had been settled out of court with non-disclosure agreements. There were whispers on real estate forums of worse intimidation, harassment, possibly even arson in a few cases where buildings he wanted had mysteriously burned. Nothing proven, nothing that could touch him, but enough smoke to suggest fire. And then Sarah found the articles about Victor's previous relationship. Samantha Pierce had been engaged to Victor Thornwood 7 years ago. The engagement had lasted 4 months before Samantha abruptly broke it off and moved to Arizona. There were no interviews, no statements, nothing but a brief mention in the society pages. Sarah found Samantha on social media, now Samantha Garcia, married to a teacher, living in Scottsdale. She sent a message, not expecting a response. The reply came 3 days later. If you're involved with Victor, please be careful. I can't say more than that. The NDA is airtight. But please be careful. Sarah's blood ran cold. She showed the message to Mrs. Chen over coffee one afternoon, the children at school, Victor at the office. I tried to warn you, Mrs. Chen said softly. Not directly, I couldn't. But I hoped you'd see past the charm. You knew what he was. I suspected. My nephew worked for one of Victor's construction companies 5 years ago. There was an accident, poor safety standards. My nephew was badly injured. Victor's lawyers made the whole thing disappear with money and threats. Mrs. Chen's hands trembled around her coffee cup. I thought maybe with a wife, with children in the house, he might soften. That you might civilize him. Instead, I just gave him better cover. Sarah felt sick. The perfect family man image to hide the monster underneath. What will you do? I don't know. I signed a contract. The prenup is ironclad. If I leave before 5 years, I get almost nothing, not enough to support the children the way they deserve. And if I try to expose him. Sarah thought about those 14 lawsuits, all silenced with money and lawyers. He'd destroy me. Then you survive, Mrs. Chen said firmly. You count down the days. You protect your children. And when those 5 years are up, you take his money and you run. But Sarah wasn't sure she could survive 4 more years of this. Wasn't sure there'd be anything left of her to run. The final revelation came from an unexpected source. Maria, the housekeeper. Sarah found her crying in the kitchen one afternoon, her eyes red and swollen. Maria? What's wrong? The older woman looked up, startled, then quickly wiped her eyes. Nothing, Mrs. Thornwood. I'm sorry. I'll get back to work. Please, tell me what's wrong. Maria hesitated. Then the words tumbled out. My daughter needs surgery. Appendicitis. But I don't have insurance that covers it, and the hospital wants $5,000 upfront. I asked Mr. Thornwood for a loan. I've worked for him for 8 years. Never missed a day, and he said. Her voice broke. He said if I couldn't handle my financial obligations, perhaps I should find other employment. Sarah felt rage building in her chest. How old is your daughter? 16. She's in so much pain, Mrs. Thornwood, but without the surgery. Where is she now? At home with my sister. They said if I can't pay by tomorrow, they won't admit her. Sarah didn't even think about it. She went to her room, retrieved her checkbook, the account Victor had set up for her personal expenses, and wrote a check for $7,000. This is for the surgery and any other expenses. Take the rest of the day off. Take tomorrow too. Be with your daughter. Maria stared at the check, tears streaming down her face. I can't accept this, Mr. Thornwood. Let me worry about Mr. Thornwood. After Maria left, Sarah sat in her suite and waited. Victor reviewed all the household accounts personally every week. He'd see the check. And then, she didn't have to wait long. Victor came home that evening in a cold fury. He found Sarah in the library and closed the door behind him with ominous quiet. $7,000 to the housekeeper. Want to explain? Her daughter needed surgery. You refused to help your employee of 8 years, so I did. That money is for your personal use, not for playing Lady Bountiful to the staff. Victor's voice was dangerously soft. You overstepped. I used my personal account to help a child in need. I didn't overstep anything. Everything you have is because of me. This house, those clothes, that account, all of it is mine, Sarah. Mine. And you use it as I see fit. Or what? Sarah stood, facing him directly. You'll cut me off. Take the children's schools away? Throw us out. She was shaking with anger now, months of resentment and fear boiling over. Go ahead, Victor. Show everyone what you really are. Show them the monster behind the charity galas and the business suits. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist hard enough to bruise. You think you know me? You don't know anything. I know enough. I know about the lawsuits, the evictions, the accidents at your construction sites. I know about Samantha Pierce and why she ran from you. I know you're not a businessman. You're a predator in an expensive suit. Victor's grip tightened, his face inches from hers. And what exactly do you think you can do with that information? You signed an NDA, Sarah. Everything about our marriage, about me, is covered. You speak to anyone, and I'll take everything. The children's trust funds, this house, every penny. I'll make sure you end up exactly where you were before me, broke, desperate, and alone. You can't touch the trust funds. The contract can be challenged. I have lawyers who can tie you up in court for years, drain any settlement fighting legal battles until you're bankrupt again. He released her wrist, his expression cold. You need to understand something, Sarah. I own you. Not legally, perhaps, but practically. You belong to me for the next 4 years. And if you try to leave, if you try to expose me, I will make your life a living hell. Your children will suffer. You will suffer. And when I'm done, you'll beg to come back. He left her standing there, shaking with fear and rage. Sarah looked down at her wrist, already darkening with bruises in the shape of his fingers. Physical proof, finally. Evidence of what he really was. But she knew it wouldn't matter. Bruises faded, and monsters with enough money and power were very, very good at making problems disappear. Breaking point. Sarah wore long sleeves to cover the bruises. She told herself it was a one-time thing, that Victor had been stressed, that it wouldn't happen again. It happened again. Not often, Victor was too smart for that. But every few weeks, when Sarah pushed back against his control or challenged him in front of others, she'd feel his grip on her arm too tight, leaving marks. Once, during an argument about her volunteering too much at the school, he'd grabbed her by the shoulders and shaken her hard enough that her teeth rattled. You're embarrassing me, he hissed. People are starting to talk about my wife spending all her time with children like some common teacher. You're better than that. Act like it. Sarah started documenting everything. She took photos of the bruises, made notes of each incident, saved every threatening email and text message. She opened a secret email account and sent copies of everything to herself, creating a digital trail that Victor couldn't erase. She didn't know what she was building toward. Legal action seemed impossible given the prenup and NDA, but she needed to feel like she had some power, some agency in her own life. The children noticed, Tyler especially. Did he hurt you? Her son asked one evening, his eyes on the bruise peeking out from under her sleeve. I bumped into a door. Don't lie to me, Mom. I'm not a little kid anymore. Tyler's voice was hard. He did this. I know he did. Tyler, I'm going to tell someone. A teacher, or the police, or... No. Sarah grabbed his hands. Tyler, listen to me. If you tell anyone, it will make things worse. Much worse. Do you understand? Victor has lawyers, money, power. He'll say I'm lying, that I'm unstable, that I'm trying to take his money. And he might try to take you and Emma from me. Tyler's eyes went wide with fear. He can do that. I don't know, but I can't risk it. Please, baby. I need you to trust me. I'm figuring this out, but I need time. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. Then, 4 years. You said 4 more years until we can leave. 3.5 now. That's too long, Mom. What if he really hurts you? What if something happens and we can't leave? Sarah had the same thoughts every night, lying in her enormous bed in her gilded suite, listening to the silence of the mansion and wondering how she'd ended up here. She'd survived cancer, poverty, abandonment, only to end up trapped in a different kind of nightmare. I'll be careful, she promised Tyler. I'll survive this. I survived everything else, didn't I? But she wasn't sure anymore. She wasn't sure there was enough of her left to survive. The catalyst for change came from an unexpected source, Victor's ego. He announced one evening that he was running for Oakland County Commissioner, a position that would give him even more power and influence. The campaign would be extensive, he explained, with media appearances, interviews, public scrutiny. This is important, Sarah. We'll be under a microscope. Everything we do, everything we say will be examined. His eyes were hard. I need you to be perfect. The perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect political spouse. Sarah listened with growing dread. More public appearances meant more opportunities for Victor to control her, to monitor her every move. It meant 4 years of pretending to love a man she was beginning to actively hate. What if I don't want to be a political wife? She asked carefully. That's not a choice you get to make. This was always part of the plan, part of why I needed a family. Victor's tone was matter of fact. You'll do what's required, unless you want to breach our contract and forfeit everything. That night, Sarah lay awake and made a decision. She couldn't survive this for 3.5 more years. The monster had been revealed, and he was getting worse, not better. If she stayed, one of two things would happen. Victor would eventually hurt her seriously enough that she couldn't hide it, or she'd lose herself completely, becoming nothing more than the empty shell of a woman playing a role. Either way, she'd be destroyed. She needed an exit strategy, and she needed it now. The plan. Sarah found a lawyer through a domestic violence support group she discovered online. Attorney Rachel Morrison specialized in high-net-worth divorce cases involving abuse. Their first consultation was held in Rachel's office in Ann Arbor, far enough from Oakland County that Sarah felt safe from Victor's network. "Your situation is complicated," Rachel said after reviewing copies of the prenup, NDA, and Sarah's documentation of abuse. "The contract is extremely well crafted. Leaving before the 5-year mark would essentially leave you with nothing." "I know, but I can't stay. He's getting worse." Rachel tapped her pen against the desk thoughtfully. "There are a few options. First, we could try to prove coercion or duress in signing the prenup. Argue that you were so desperate when you agreed to the marriage that you couldn't consent freely. Would that work? Maybe. But Victor's lawyers will argue that you had time to review the documents, that you weren't forced to sign, that you entered into the arrangement with eyes open." Rachel pulled out another file. "The second option is to document the abuse more thoroughly and file for divorce based on domestic violence. Michigan law allows for the nullification of prenuptial agreements in cases of extreme abuse. I have photos of bruises, text messages, emails. That's a start, but we'd need more. Medical records would be helpful. Testimony from witnesses. The more documentation, the better." Rachel leaned forward. "Sarah, I need to be honest with you. Going up against Victor Thornwood in court will be brutal. He has resources, connections, and a reputation to protect. He'll paint you as a gold digger who's trying to extort him. He'll drag your name through the mud. I know. Your children will be affected. There will be media coverage, especially if he's running for county commissioner. Every detail of your life will be scrutinized." Sarah thought about Tyler and Emma, about the life they'd built in the Thornwood mansion, about the schools, the opportunities, the security. Then she thought about Tyler's eyes when he asked if Victor had hurt her, about Emma's increasing anxiety and nightmares, about the woman she was becoming, beaten down, fearful, disappearing a little more each day. "I don't care," Sarah said firmly. "I survived cancer. I survived poverty. I can survive this too. And my children deserve to see their mother fight. Not just accept abuse, because it comes with a nice house and a good school district." Rachel smiled. "Then, let's build a case." Over the next 6 months, Sarah carefully documented everything. She started seeing a therapist, ostensibly for stress management, which Victor approved of as long as it kept her functioning properly, and used those sessions to create a medical record of the psychological abuse. Dr. Jennifer Wang was skilled at documenting domestic violence, noting Sarah's anxiety, depression, and PTSD symptoms in clinical language that would hold up in court. Sarah also began rebuilding her professional credentials. She took online accounting courses through the University of Michigan, updating her skills and creating a paper trail that would show she was capable of supporting herself and her children without Victor's money. She reconnected with former colleagues from Henderson and Associates, slowly rebuilding her professional network. Most of them were shocked to learn she'd married Victor Thornwood. Some were impressed, others concerned, all of them curious. "I thought you'd died or something," her former supervisor, Greg Martinez, told her over coffee. "You just disappeared. Cancer, divorce, poverty, remarriage. It's been a busy few years." Sarah kept her tone light. "Well, if you ever want to come back to accounting, you'd have a place at Henderson. Your work was always top-notch." Sarah filed that information away. She'd need a job when this was over. She also made a crucial ally. Victor's housekeeper, Maria, the woman whose daughter Sarah had helped, was fiercely loyal now, and she saw everything that happened in the Thornwood mansion. "I'll testify if you need me to," Maria said quietly one afternoon. "I've seen how he treats you, how he talks to you when he thinks no one's listening. It's not right, Mrs. Thornwood. Money doesn't give a man the right to treat his wife like property." "Thank you," Sarah whispered, "but I need you to be careful. If Victor suspects you're helping me, I've already found another job. I start in 2 months. He can't threaten what he doesn't control." Maria's eyes were fierce. "You saved my daughter's life. Let me help save yours." The turning point came at a campaign event in September. Victor was hosting a fundraiser at the estate, 200 guests, local politicians, business leaders, media. Sarah was expected to play her part. The elegant, supportive wife, gracious hostess, perfect political spouse. She wore a champagne-colored Valentino gown, her makeup expertly applied to hide the exhaustion, her smile practiced until it looked genuine. She circulated through the crowd, making small talk about education reform and infrastructure development. laughing at mediocre jokes, being everything Victor needed her to be. Then she overheard Victor talking to a journalist from the Detroit Free Press. "Family is everything to me," Victor was saying, his hand on the shoulder of a local councilman. "My wife Sarah and I are committed to building a stronger community for all families, especially those struggling with economic hardship." Having experienced challenges in her own past, Sarah brings a unique perspective on the needs of Oakland County's most vulnerable residents. Sarah felt rage bubble up in her chest. He was using her story, her cancer, her poverty, her desperation, as a campaign talking point, packaging her suffering as evidence of his compassion. She walked over to the group, her smile bright and cold. "Darling, you're being too modest. We should tell them the whole story." Victor's eyes flashed warning, but the journalist was already interested. "Please, Mrs. Thornwood. Our readers love personal stories. Well, when we met, I was facing eviction with my 2 young children. Victor saw potential in me, in us, and offered a mutually beneficial arrangement. He got the family image he needed for his political aspirations, and I got financial security." Sarah's voice was sweet as poison. "It's really a wonderful example of pragmatic problem solving, don't you think?" The room had gone very quiet. The journalist was writing furiously. Victor's hand clamped on Sarah's elbow, tight enough to hurt. Sarah's being too humble. It was love at first sight for both of us. His grip tightened in warning. "If you'll excuse us, I need to steal my wife for a moment." He practically dragged her to his study, slamming the door behind them. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice was low, dangerous. "Telling the truth." Sarah pulled her arm free. "You wanted to use my story for your campaign? Fine. But let's tell the whole truth. That our marriage is a business transaction. That you bought a ready-made family like you buy distressed properties. That." His hand struck her face before she could finish the sentence. Not a slap, a punch hard enough to snap her head back, to split her lip, to send her stumbling into the desk. Sarah tasted blood. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard Victor's breathing, harsh and ragged. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" The journalist, the guests, "Hit me again," Sarah said clearly, her phone already in her hand recording. "Go ahead, Victor. Show me what you really are." He lunged for the phone, but Sarah was faster, sending the video to Rachel Morrison's email before Victor could grab it. "Too late," she whispered. "I have everything I need now. Medical records, witness testimony, documentation of financial coercion, and now video evidence of physical assault." She touched her bleeding lip. "You lose." Victor stared at her, his chest heaving, and Sarah saw the exact moment he realized his mistake. The monster had finally shown its teeth in a way that couldn't be hidden, couldn't be explained away. "You'll regret this," he said softly. "I'll destroy you. Your children will hate you for taking away everything they have here. My children will be proud of me for finally fighting back." Sarah walked to the door. "I'm leaving. Tonight. I'm taking Tyler and Emma, and we're going somewhere you can't find us until the divorce is finalized. My lawyer will be in touch. The prenup is void in cases of domestic violence." You should have read the fine print more carefully, Victor. Or maybe you did, and you just never thought I'd have the courage to use it. Sarah opened the door. "Goodbye. I'd say it's been a pleasure, but we both know that would be a lie." She walked out of the study, through the foyer where wealthy guests were pretending they hadn't heard raised voices, up the stairs to her children's rooms. Tyler and Emma were already awake, eyes wide with fear. "Pack a bag," Sarah said calmly. "We're leaving." "Where are we going?" Emma's voice trembled. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere he can't hurt us anymore." Sarah pulled her daughter into her arms. "Somewhere we can breathe." Tyler was already packing, his jaw set with determination. "I knew this day would come," he said. "I've had a bag ready for months." Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. Her 8-year-old son had been preparing for their escape, living in fear but ready to run when the moment came. They left through the kitchen, Maria meeting them with keys to her car. "Take it," Maria said. "I'll report it stolen tomorrow. Give you time to get wherever you're going." She pressed an envelope into Sarah's hand. $5,000. Everything I've saved. For you and the children. "Maria, I can't. You saved my daughter. Now I'm saving you." Maria hugged her fiercely. "Oh, run. Don't look back." Sarah drove through the night with her children sleeping in the back seat, heading north toward the Upper Peninsula where Rachel Morrison had arranged a safe house. Her lip throbbed. Her face was swelling, and she had no idea what the next days, weeks, or months would bring. But for the first time in 2 years, she felt free, rising from the ashes. The divorce took 8 months and was every bit as brutal as Rachel had warned. Victor's lawyers tried everything, painting Sarah as a gold digger, a liar, an unstable woman who'd married for money and was now trying to extort more through false accusations. But Sarah had documentation, medical records, photos, videos, testimony from Maria, from Mrs. Chen, even from Samantha Pierce, who finally broke her NDA to testify about similar abuse years before. The media coverage was intense. Headlines screamed millionaire real estate developer accused of domestic violence, and political candidate's dark secret revealed. Victor's campaign collapsed. His business partners started distancing themselves. Lawsuits from former employees and tenants, previously settled in silence, suddenly resurfaced as victims found courage in numbers. Victor fought hard, but the video Sarah had recorded that final night was damning. The judge nullified the prenup, awarded Sarah full custody of the children, and ordered Victor to pay substantial support plus a settlement of $5 million, more than the original contract had promised. He'll appeal, Rachel warned. Let him. I don't care how long it takes. Sarah touched her face. The bruises long healed, but the memories still vivid. I'm not afraid of him anymore. The final decree came through on a Tuesday in May. Sarah signed the papers in Rachel's office, her hand steady, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Tyler and Emma were waiting in the reception area. They'd spent the past months in therapy, processing their own trauma from living in the Thornwood mansion, from watching their mother slowly break under Victor's control. They were healing, both of them stronger for having survived. Is it done? Tyler asked. It's done. We're free. Emma threw her arms around Sarah's waist. Can we get a dog now? You said when we had our own place. Sarah laughed, real and genuine. Yes, sweetheart. We can get a dog. They moved to Ann Arbor, to a modest 3-bedroom house that Sarah bought with cash from the settlement. It wasn't a mansion, didn't have a pool or home theater or grounds that stretched to the horizon. But it was theirs, truly theirs, with no monster lurking in the shadows. Sarah went back to work at Henderson and Associates, easing back into accounting with the support of colleagues who'd become friends. She was good at it still, her skills sharp, her mind clear now that it wasn't constantly clouded with fear and survival calculations. Tyler thrived in his new school, joining the basketball team and making friends who came over for sleepovers and video game tournaments. Emma's art decorated every wall of their small house, bright splashes of color and imagination that hadn't been allowed in the sterile perfection of the Thornwood estate. They got a dog, a rescue mutt named Lucky who slept on Emma's bed and followed Tyler everywhere, as if he understood these children needed something loyal and loving and uncomplicated. And Sarah started healing. Not just the physical scars from Victor's abuse, but the deeper wounds, the ones left by poverty, by illness, by a world that had taught her she was only worth what she could provide to others. She learned to value herself again, learned that survival wasn't the same as living, learned that her worth wasn't measured in bank accounts or wedding rings or designer dresses. 1 year after the divorce, Sarah was shopping at a farmer's market in downtown Ann Arbor when she saw Jenny, the homeless woman she'd met outside the boutique in Birmingham so long ago. Jenny was working at a vegetable stand, her face healthy and clean, her smile genuine. Sarah. Oh my God, Sarah Mitchell, or wait, what's your name now? Just Mitchell. I took back my maiden name. Sarah hugged her. Jenny, you look amazing. How are you? Good. Really good. That shelter you connected me with, they helped me get clean, helped me find work, helped me get a small apartment. Jenny's eyes were bright. I saw the news about your divorce, about that man you were married to. Sarah, I'm so sorry you went through that. I survived. We survived. Sarah looked around at the bustling market, at Tyler and Emma browsing a honey stand, at Lucky tugging on his leash to investigate interesting smells. And we're better for it. You know what I remember most about the day we met? Jenny said. You gave me money, but more than that, you looked at me like I was a person. Not a problem, not an eyesore, a person who mattered. I've never forgotten that. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. You helped me too, Jenny. You reminded me of who I could have become if I'd stayed in that marriage. You reminded me that money isn't worth your soul. They exchanged numbers, promised to stay in touch. And as Sarah walked away with her children and her dog, her reusable grocery bags full of fresh vegetables and local honey, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Hope that the future could be different. Hope that she'd raised children who understood both kindness and strength. Hope that surviving monsters didn't mean becoming one yourself. The truth about survival. 5 years after leaving Victor Thornwood, Sarah Mitchell stood in front of a community center in Detroit, addressing a group of women in crisis. She'd started a nonprofit, Survivor Strength, that helped women escape abusive relationships, providing legal support, housing assistance, job training, and counseling. The organization was funded partly by her settlement money, partly by donations from people who'd read her story and wanted to help. I know what you're thinking. Sarah told the room full of women, some with black eyes, some with children clinging to their legs, all of them desperate and afraid. You're thinking you don't have options. You're thinking survival means accepting whatever you can get, even if it costs you your dignity, your safety, your sense of self. She paused, looking at each face. I thought the same thing. I married a monster to survive. I told myself I was doing it for my children, for security, for a better life. And those things were true. But I was also doing it because I'd forgotten I had value beyond what I could provide to someone else. I'd forgotten I deserve respect, kindness, love, not as a reward for good behavior, but as a basic human right. A woman in the front row raised her hand. But how did you leave? If you signed contracts, if he had all the power, how? Carefully, strategically, with help from people who believed in me. Sarah smiled. I documented everything. I built a case. I found a good lawyer. I stopped accepting the narrative that I was powerless. She leaned forward. But here's the most important thing. I decided I'd rather be poor and free than rich and caged. And once I made that decision, everything else became possible. Another hand. What about your children? Weren't they angry about losing everything? Sarah looked at Tyler and Emma, now 13 and 11, sitting in the back row. Tyler was on the community center's youth advisory board. Emma was teaching art classes to younger kids. My children learned that things don't matter as much as people. They learned that a small house full of love is better than a mansion full of fear. They learned that their mother is strong enough to fight monsters, even the ones who wear expensive suits and smile at charity galas. Sarah's voice broke slightly. They learned that surviving isn't the same as living, and that sometimes you have to risk everything to have a life worth living. After the meeting, women lined up to talk to Sarah, to share their stories, to ask for help. Sarah listened to each one, offered resources, made connections, provided the kind of support she desperately needed years ago. This was her redemption, her purpose. She'd married a monster to survive, but she'd left him to live, and now she was helping other women do the same. That evening, Sarah sat on the porch of her small house, watching fireflies dance across the lawn while Lucky dozed at her feet. Tyler and Emma were inside, arguing good-naturedly about whose turn it was to choose the movie. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You destroyed my life. I hope you're happy. Victor. Still trying to maintain control, even from the ruins of his shattered empire. His political career was dead. His business was struggling under the weight of lawsuits and scandal. He'd lost everything he'd built, and he blamed her. Sarah deleted the text without responding. She'd learned that monsters only had power if you gave it to them. She'd stopped feeding Victor's ego months ago, stopped responding to his attempts to manipulate her through anger or guilt. She'd survived him. And more importantly, she'd survived herself. The part of her that had been willing to accept a cage in exchange for security. As the sun set over Ann Arbor, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Sarah thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago. Desperate, broken, willing to sell herself for her children's future. She didn't regret the choices she'd made. Regret was useless. And she'd learned that survival sometimes required impossible decisions. But she'd also learned that surviving wasn't enough. You had to reclaim yourself afterward, piece by painful piece, until you remembered who you were beneath the trauma. Mom, Emma called from inside. We picked the movie. Come on. Sarah stood, scratching Lucky behind the ears, and walked into her small, imperfect, beautiful home. This was what she'd fought for. Not wealth or status or security, but this. The freedom to be imperfect. The right to make her own choices. The chance to raise her children in a house filled with love instead of fear. She'd married a monster to survive, but she'd left him to live. And that made all the difference. Outro. Sarah Mitchell's story is a reminder that survival is only the beginning. Real freedom comes when we decide our worth isn't defined by what we endure, but by what we refuse to accept. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't staying, it's having the courage to leave, to rebuild, to become the person you were meant to be all along. This is the story of how one woman married a monster, survived him, and learned to live again.